Coming up on Why Should I Trust You? What happens when you take fear, sprinkle in a deep desire for just a little bit of control, and you add in the feeling that you're totally and completely powerless in the face of some faceless, all-powerful force that is pulling the strings? Welcome to our age of conspiracy. Look no further than the Jeffrey Epstein dumpster fire now consuming our politics. But wait, what does all this have to do with trust in public health, medicine, and science? A ton. The phrase conspiracy theorist is tossed around a lot these days, and it infuriates a lot of the people we speak with. They say public health and scientists use that label as a convenient way to dismiss those who are challenging the institutional take on things after years of being misled. They say a little bit of common sense and healthy suspicion is how you get to the truth. Meanwhile, there's a lot of worry among public health and scientists who say the absence of evidence combined with our hypercharged media ecosystem is leading people to take the easy route with fantastical claims of government and industry cover-up. They say facts and reason are how you get to the truth. Today, we're talking about conspiracy theories and why we're drawn to them. Is there often a kernel of truth hidden inside a compelling narrative of otherwise misleading information? Or is it sometimes just a good old-fashioned government cover-up in plain sight? We speak with two Wall Street Journal reporters who investigated the OG conspiracy theory of them all. We're talking UFOs and whether the U.S. government is covering up the truth. Their reporting was extraordinary, but not for the reasons you might think. And what, if anything, can a health and science-curious public learn from all this? Let's get started. Hey, everyone!
Greetings.
Hi. We are doing something crazy today, guys. I'm so,
I know.
This is outside of my comfort zone.
Now for something completely different. But it'll all make sense. We promise you. So much to get to today. But first, who are we? I am Brenda Adhikari.
I'm Tom Johnson.
I'm Maggie Bartlett.
I'm Dr. Mark.
So, yes, we want to first thank our friends from the Make America Healthy Again movement, Aaron Everett, Elizabeth Frost, and Jacqueline Capriotti for sharing their reactions to our previous episode with nutrition scientist Kevin Hall. It was on Substack. It was really cool to we were trying something new, doing an episode and then kind of posting responses from some of you who are listening. And a little bit of a tease here, but we are working up a special episode, bringing together Kevin, some other folks in the nutrition space, with some folks from Maha. That's going to be coming up soon, and that'll be super cool. So guys, just, I don't know about everyone here, but I keep hearing from folks in research who are listening to the pod, and they're telling us about a study or some type of research project that was underway, when the funding from NIH or another source got cut off. And what's interesting to me is, sure, there's a lot of research out there, but it's particularly the work that's aligned with the goals of the Make America Healthy Again movement. So like in the space of, chronic disease and diabetes and cancer and nutrition. So we wanted to kind of try out like a little recurring segment we're going to do called I Was Just About To, where we're going to shout out some interesting work that people were just about to do that's been stopped in its tracks. Like we said, work that's squarely aligned with this administration's goals to make America healthy again. And there were two people who already reached out to us. And by the way, we wrote a Substack about it. But Mark, you want to start us off on the first one?
Yeah. So first up, we heard from Dr. Brendan Manning from Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And he wrote to us, he says, I was just about to determine how tumors consume nutrients to grow. So he was studying what cancers eat to survive. And lest you forget, when cancer thrives, we die. So yes, we may want to learn more about how those cancer cells basically steal our food and use it to destroy us. So the goal of Brendan's research, and he's been doing this for a while, was to figure out what treatments and dietary interventions could slow down or even stop cancer cells from growing. But he tells us his funding was cut. He writes, it was a blanket termination of all federal grants to Harvard. He had an outstanding investigator award from the National Cancer Institute, which funds, he says, most of my lab's research, terminated in its 10th year. Now, according to the New York Times, Harvard is said to be open to spending up to $500 million to resolve this Trump dispute. And we heard the similar settlement with $200 million from Columbia. So we don't know what's going to happen with that. But you should know that his lab was not just focused on cancer. So he told us his entire department, quote, studies how metabolism goes awry in chronic diseases, including cancer, like we said, but diabetes, neurodegeneration, and in the aging process in general. So ironically, just like our guest last week, Kevin Hall, we mentioned the nutrition researcher studying ultra-processed food. Brendan's research also happens to be very much in the MAHA wheelhouse as it relates to diet and chronic diseases. So Brenda, you heard from somebody else.
Yes. So I heard from Dr. Tashara Leek, who's an associate professor at the Division of Nutritional Science at Cornell. She's a registered dietitian, associate dean in human ecology at Cornell. And she wrote, I was just about to finish up a cohort of the Advanced Cooking Education 4-H After School Club at New York City middle schools when the USDA terminated my grant. She went on to say that in the US, she talked about the just the poor diet quality and we've got the highest prevalence of obesity among our adolescents, and that many adolescents in low-income homes are responsible for cooking and caring for others at home. And that despite these facts, there are few nutrition programs for U.S. teens with adult-level household responsibilities. Now, Tashara was awarded a grant for nearly $1 million back in 2020 from the USDA to develop and implement this advanced cooking 4-H after-school club at New York City middle schools that received Title I funding, like a big pool of students who come from low-income families. And like for 3 months, there would be these middle school kids would meet after school to receive smart snacks, engage in mindfulness exercises, and complete activities that expose them to careers in food and nutrition. They would take groceries home to complete cooking labs, and they would learn about nutrition topics. She even received back in January the White House Presidential Early Career Award for scientists and engineers for developing this program. But in May, she received the termination letter with no notice. And she said that, she got this termination notice in there. They said something that they were going to be terminating grants based on the words like race and DEI coming up. And she was like, that was nowhere to be found in her grant. She says that the goals of this program are squarely aligned with the Make America Healthy Again movement, to bring more attention towards better nutrition habits, chronic disease. And so, look, we want to thank Tashara and Brendan for sharing their stories. We're doing this to highlight some work that we think looks and sounds pretty cool and had real promise before it was stopped in their tracks. I'm not here to say that every single grant out there in the world needs to be approved. I'm sure there's some bloat and some stuff that, leaves our head scratching, but a lot of them were doing some pretty cool shit, if I'm being honest, that could impact people's lives for the better, especially the ones that were literally what the MAHA movement was about. So look, if you have your own I was just about to story, just send it to us at questions@whyshoulditrustyou.net. We'll take a look. Thank you again. So y'all, now again, we're like zapping on this episode. Mm-hmm. Look, I love today's episode. We booked these guys some time back, but the time of talking about conspiracy and conspiracy theory, right now, this week, in the middle of this massive Epstein story is freaking bonkers.
It's consumed Washington. It's consumed media coverage for like the past 4 weeks. It trailed Trump as went off to Scotland. It's trailed Trump as he's, returned. I mean, it's just incredible, the story. And it's being countered with another conspiracy theory story about, Obama committing treason. So this is not just the age of conspiracy, but we are in the summer of conspiracy.
The week of conspiracy.
The week of conspiracy.
It's like a Russian nesting doll of conspiracies. Yeah. And look, so Tom, we mentioned that the phrase conspiracy theory gets thrown around a lot in the realm of public health. And I just kind of want to pause on that for a second, because it's a phrase, guys, that even for me, after all this work we've been doing and with speaking with people from MAHA, it's a phrase that even I don't use that liberally anymore, because I know it's like a trigger phrase for a lot of people who are skeptical of mainstream institutional actions, whether it's in science or public health. And they will often say that look, just because we have some nervousness about the vaccine, or we're not even or that we do get concerned about the revolving door between pharmaceutical companies and government agencies, that doesn't make us a conspiracy theorist. But at the same time, there are things out there that are not supported by data about, microchips in the vaccines, or things that people are saying about mRNA technology that I'm sure people have questions on, but the things that's being said are really out there.
And this is something we've kind of wrestled with. There is no definition of conspiracy theory that doesn't have a negative connotation. It just implies this paranoia, this fantastical beliefs that aren't grounded in evidence. But at the same time, as we're saying, that doesn't mean you can't be questioning things. That doesn't mean you can't be suspicious of things, because sometimes what is considered conspiracy theory turns out to be true. And other times there are things that are just straight up conspiracy theory with all the negative connotations. I mean, if you say there was this collusion to steal the 2020 election, the big lie, if you say that that's true, I think that's a conspiracy theory. And, you draw the line. But at the same time, I totally get this kind of triggering, especially with folks that we speak with on this podcast a lot, that they're just being dismissed with the phrase and that no one's hearing them out and they're raising concerns and they're seeking answers. And to just swat all that away with this big fat label of, oh, they're conspiracy theorists, like that's just lazy.
Right.
Yeah. It's almost like it's a messy reality. I mean, sometimes conspiracy theories are just flat out false, like full stop, like intentional deception.
Yeah.
Those kinds of theories, they collapse when you start digging without too much digging, really.
Right.
Then there's this is the hardest one category, I think, these conspiracy theories that are lies aimed at manipulating us for someone else's gain. And these are bad actors. And this is the hardest sometimes, I think, to root out because they have used this conspiracy theory to divide people or make money, and it really turns emotional. And I think that part is really hard to tease out. Then there's this idea that other times conspiracy theories are dead on and true. And everybody who has like a fringe conspiracy theory holding will anchor to this one. Sometimes they are dead on and true. I mean, this is rare, but it does happen.
It's like 1% that end up turning out true. And I completely agree, Mark. It ends up being those anecdotes are used to justify any of the others. But it's that in-between category where there's a grain of truth somewhere in there that's being used that is way more dangerous. And I think what we are experiencing way more often than the wild out there conspiracy theories. And they all get grouped together in one category.
The hardest one is this, like you said, the kernel of truth. Like it's almost like there's truth in every joke. There's truth in every conspiracy theory, like a kernel of it. And so maybe there isn't some secret clique of politicians and pharma execs pushing dangerous vaccines to profit. Okay, so maybe that's not true, but maybe our system of industry-funded research is kind of contaminating the publication field or resulting in research that goes awfully soft on industry. Yeah. But it's that original kernel of truth that gets tangled up with, you sprinkle in some recipes like exaggerations or misinterpretations or false assumptions. These theories take hold because of that original kernel of truth. So it makes the whole story feel like it really could be real, even if the exaggerations have taken us off course.
Yeah. So these two Wall Street Journal reporters, they're going to join us in a little bit. But look, conspiracies, it's a tale as old as time. Tom, let's kick things off. I think you've got a pretty good yarn out there on conspiracy theory.
Yeah, so we'll go back to March 8th, 1971. This was the big night. This was Muhammad Ali fighting Joe Frazier. It was called the fight of the century. This is back when everybody tuned into the same thing on television. And that was a huge TV night. And there was a small group they were anti-war activists, but on this night, they were going to be burglars. They wanted to break into an FBI office, and they thought this is the perfect night to do it because these security guards, just like everybody else, is going to be totally distracted by this fight. They opted for this field office in Pennsylvania. And their goal was to unearth evidence to prove what they were all feeling, this conspiracy theory that they were all marinating in, and they wanted to prove that it was true. So in the late 1960s, there were a bunch of anti-war activists, there were civil rights organizers. While they were in separate camps, they were both experiencing the same thing. They were both feeling that the U.S. government was using its intelligence agencies to spy, to infiltrate their groups, and all with this goal of like derailing their efforts. Even in this crazy, turbulent time period in our country, this idea that the FBI would break the law, would violate Americans' rights, seemed far-fetched. But in the break-in, the group struck gold. One of the files they pulled out of that office was labeled COINTELPRO, and another was all about an FBI plan to target the anti-war movement to, quote, enhance the paranoia and get the point across there's an FBI agent behind every mailbox. So they took the files and they sent them out to all different media sources. And I think it was just the Washington Post that wrote up the story. But very soon the lid was blown off of a secret FBI program called COINTELPRO, and that's short for Counterintelligence Program. It would later lead to a Senate investigation, this big church committee named after Frank Church, a senator. It was a bipartisan group that concluded that the FBI had carried out a, quote, sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association. So this just wasn't surveillance. They were blackmailing and intimidating civil rights leaders like MLK. They were trying to disrupt these anti-war movement groups. But, the bottom line is it was confirmation that this wasn't just some far left conspiracy theory. And we were off to the races. Right on the heels of this, we get the Pentagon Papers. We get Watergate. We get Nixon's resignation. He gets pardoned by Ford. And now we are fully into this new era in which trust in our leaders, in our government, in our democratic institutions was like hemorrhaging. If you flash forward to today, we have a president who got his start in politics promoting a conspiracy theory that President Obama wasn't an American citizen. We've endured these massive economic shifts that have exploded the have and the have not divide. We fought long wars, essentially on the backs of the working class. We've seen the opioid crisis fueled by big pharma. We've survived a pandemic which upended just about everything in our daily lives. And in short, like the conditions for trust are rock bottom, and we are in such a fertile time for conspiracy theories.
Tom, I'm just trying to understand, what is the difference between just a cover-up and a conspiracy theory?
I think it's the idea of that the government is hiding some sort of a covert action that they don't want the public to know about that would reveal some sort of a sinister truth.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what I think about when I think about conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and there's a conspiracy of like multiple things are working, together to pull off this bad thing that they want to cover up and keep secretive. Yeah.
So I guess it's like if you're hiding something, it just makes it's like fertile ground to develop a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be true. But let's we said that the OG of all conspiracy theories is, do UFOs exist? Is there some sort of like cover up? But so let's just ask, here's a classic. What percentage of Americans, here's a quiz. What percentage of Americans think some UFOs are alien spacecraft?
I do.
Brenda, give me a number.
I mean,
Guys,
this one is just, it's so perplexing that somebody would believe this. Maybe
Thomas,
you don't believe it?
I just don't believe it.
Stop judging us.
I know.
Judging
I'm going
us
to
believe
say
it.
20. I'm going to say 20%.
I'm going to say 30%.
40%. 40%.
I can't.
Wow.
I can't either. I don't know.
Listen, I am just saying, to quote Carl Sagan in Contact, the universe is infinite. What are the chances that we are alone?
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, keep going. I think that was Carl Sagan, by the way. Don't.
Go
I
with
just
it.
saw it in the Jodie Foster.
Say it with
movie.
confidence.
Okay. So YouGov asked, here's another one. YouGov asked whether you believe the U.S. government is concealing information about UFOs. So here, what number do you think that is? What percentage?
Well, first you have to
Americans?
ask, do you believe YouGov?
I believe you go.
I believe YouGov because it's close to YouTube.
All right, so
it
is the government
It must be good.
Is the government aware that there's aliens and
Yeah. Do you believe the government is concealing information? Like they know something about UFOs?
40% think there are aliens coming here.
Yeah.
1% think the government's covering that up and
Yeah.
is fully aware of it.
Yes.
I'm going to go with 20%.
I'm going to go with 40. I'm going to say 40% because of 40. I'm just going to go with the 40%. If you're buying the
Add 'em up. Add them up.
No.
60%. Brenda's 40. Match Tom's 20. 60%. All right.
Let's
move on because
crazy
we're going to
shit
talk
about our
UFOs
government.
a lot with our guests. So let's move on to some other interesting topics. What percentage of Americans think Oswald wasn't a lone gunman, as the government concluded, but instead was part of a conspiracy to kill
A ton of
JFK?
people.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with 60%.
Yeah,
Pretty good.
definitely above.
65%. Yeah.
Yeah. And is
That's according to Gallup.
Is that pre the files being released?
Yes, that's pre the JFK files being released.
I wonder if it's gone down.
Now, here's a really interesting one. How about what percentage of Americans think that regardless of who wins election, regardless of who's in charge of governments, there is actually one single secretive group of people that rules the world?
I kind of feel like that requires a level of organization and competence that I don't think this world has. I'm going to go with 10%.
Yeah, I'm with Brenda.
41% believe this, and this was in 2023, so it was
It's
a
gotta
long
be
time ago. 2023
people are just reading a lot into that question. I cannot believe that.
So that's just kind of like who your neighbors are and what they're thinking. So
Wow.
take that to your dog walk. Social media plays a big role in this. So social media is sort of like a bonus ingredient when you have this like crock pot of conspiracy theories trying to take hold. So we know that conspiracy theories have been around forever, but what about the impact of these algorithms that we're all like subject to that control so much of what we experience online? What role are they playing in the surge in conspiracy theories these days? So Tristan Harris, he's this tech ethicist, star of The Social Dilemma. I did a little work with him on a story that we did before. He said, quote, "You have to appeal to the Facebook algorithm to get elected." Let me say that again. You have to appeal to the Facebook algorithm to get elected. You have to appeal to the algorithm to get attention. I mean, the algorithm has primacy over media, over news, over newspaper publishers, over each of us, and it controls what we do. I know that we all know that, but when you think about people who have dedicated their life to studying this, I mean, he shows and studies how these platforms have really dangerous power over our ability to make sense of the world. I mean, these algorithms know you. I mean, really know you, even down to your swiping pattern, how long you might pause on something. You know, if you go really fast, what does that mean? If you're about to like it, but you don't like it. I mean, they could even, not on necessarily on your phone, but they could even track your eyeballs.
This sounds like a
Eyeballs
conspiracy theory.
on a screen. It does sound like a conspiracy theory. And then you start digging and, you know, maybe there's a kernel of truth. It's more than a kernel of truth because, you know, I've seen some of this work for myself and some of the reporting that I've done. But I mean, it's really like a coordinated effort. And, you know, we're like before, you know, we didn't even have AI in the picture. And one possible silver lining, everybody feels threatened by AI, but one possible silver lining might be a result of more and more Americans turning to AI. I love this little study that we found on this topic. So researchers at MIT ran an experiment. They published it in a very reputable journal, Science. They gathered a group of around 2,000 people who actually believe in conspiracy theories. For example, like the 2020 election was stolen. And so they said, all right, well, let's put these to the test with AI. So they had these people go at it with AI. It was a GPR-4 Turbo. That's the kind of AI machine they use. But anyway, the AI was instructed to essentially disabuse them of their belief in a personalized way. So they found that the AI was pretty smart, and it didn't take long before the person's confidence in their conspiracy theory had dropped by 20%. And it lasted. And this new skepticism they had held up for 2 months.
Wow.
When the researchers checked back in. So essentially what they found is that you can go down a rabbit hole, but these like conspiratorial rabbit holes may indeed have an exit or an off ramp if you get more information.
You know what's interesting about that is that I feel like in our work on the show, if like a human being doctor or scientist were to say the same thing, or like just a human were to say, no, you're wrong, like here's the truth about it, wouldn't go over well. But somehow the disembodied, like dispassionate AI maybe is a little bit different. That's interesting.
That's right. Yeah, I think I read that too, and there's some theories about exactly what you're saying, Brendan. Just is it because it's not a person? And if it's a person telling you you're wrong or trying to convince you of something otherwise, your guard goes up. You wonder, are they a Democrat? Are they a Republican? Like, what are they trying to do? Why are they trying to do this? Like, have they drank the Kool-Aid? Maybe with the AI, they're sort of putting that guard down a little bit. But I think, you know, it's not going to be long before people are saying, well, who has been feeding that AI a certain point of view? And is that AI now corrupted? And I can't trust what that AI is saying. We're already sort of seeing that, you know, play out, you know, in our media landscape. All this gets at sort of a bigger thing that's going on. And there's a researcher and a social scientist named Matthew Facciani. Am I saying that right, Brenda?
You sure
Matthew
are.
Facciani. Yeah. And he published a study recently in which he examined how this feeling of being a victim is relating to whether one believes in a conspiracy theory. So, of course, in most theories, there are powerful individuals who are colluding, but there's also these powerless victims who are, you know, taking the brunt of this. And he wanted to understand how believers of conspiracies identified with the victims. So he labeled and scored each participant's sensitivity to feeling injustice. And what he found is that the people who were more sensitive to feeling wronged or feeling like a victim were also more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. And he tested this across 15 countries, and it held up. So this isn't just an American phenomenon. He wrote that, quote, for many, believing in conspiracy theories isn't just about information. So in other words, it's not just about the information, and Mark's AI example, could maybe chip away at it if it were. But it's just ultimately not just about information. He said, quote, it's about identity. It's about justice and a deep-seated need to feel seen and protected from harm. So if we go back to those recent shifts, those recent changes that we've talked about in our world, whether it's our economy, whether it's these wars, whether it's the opioid epidemic, whether it's, name it, runaway healthcare costs, runaway profits, a lot of people are feeling victimized for a lot of good reasons. And they are very much not feeling seen.
Yeah. Look, it's this is a nice setup for a really interesting yarn that we are about to hear from these two Wall Street Journal reporters. So when we come back, we're going to be joined by Joel Schectman and Aruna Viswanatha of the Wall Street Journal. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. And a big old why should I trust you welcome to Aruna Viswanatha and Joel Schectman of the Wall Street Journal. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joel and Aruna did an investigation this past June that resulted in a piece, and I think it's a couple of pieces, titled The Pentagon Disinformation That Fueled America's UFO Mythology. And honestly, it sent our usually focused on public health minds racing. It gets to the bottom of a conspiracy theory that's been alive and well in this country for decades about, all about how the U.S. government is hiding from the public all that it knows about UFOs and extraterrestrial visitations. So Joel, let's start with you. I mean, what sparked this idea? Did you get a tip or something? How did it all start?
The way it really started, it was pretty organic. I was kind of, I've been covering national security and kind of secret government programs for a number of years. Before I was at the Journal, I was at Reuters. I was hanging out actually with just another national security reporter one night, having a few drinks, and we were talking about, the fact that you had all these kind of people from the national security community coming out of the woodwork and making these types of claims and saying that they had evidence, not just that there were, alien visitations, but that the government actually kind of had this secret program to, harvest technology from these alien ships. And when we were talking about it, I kind of came to remember that, over the years, I've, dealing with people from the CIA and from the Pentagon, I've actually run into quite a few people who believe that, right? It gives it a level of credibility because you have people who are sort of involved in this, secretive world who've kind of come to think these things. And this friend of mine actually really, really believed it. He really thought, that there was really something there. And I was kind of open to it. I was, to me, the fact that you had all these people saying this stuff, maybe there was something there. And I thought, look, I had this background going and digging into secret American intelligence operations and programs and some of the stuff that I had uncovered before, at the start of those projects, people thought it was just a conspiracy theory or something nutty. And, a lot of times the truth is pretty weird. And I thought, if these guys are making these kind of claims publicly and people really believe this, maybe, somebody should look into this, and somebody who actually knows how to find out about, secret operations and, see what I find, and it could be the greatest scoop in history.
but you were open to the idea, Joel, that there could be shenanigans here, that there could be some sort of cover up of what the government knew on this topic. You were just in a phrase, you were open to that.
Yeah, I was.
Because you'd seen some stuff. You had seen stuff in investigating. I think you said national security and secret government programs, which is.
Yeah, I had seen things that really were pretty bizarre. Now, they weren't multi-generational
alien
cover-ups with spaceships, but strange things. There could be a lot of there could be some world in which there was some truth to that story.
And Aruna, were you open to the idea that there could be something being hidden here by our government?
So I got interested in the story because we had sort of the official Pentagon position was that we looked into this after Congress told us to look into this. We haven't found any of this. It's just band of weirdos like spouting stuff and nothing to see here, move on. But then you had all these people who were, coming from pretty credible backgrounds, had spent decades at the Pentagon in very sensitive roles, saying like, "Oh yeah, the government is hiding what it knows. Like there's more here. We're scared about coming forward, but we feel like this is the right time." So it seemed very intriguing that clearly something was going on here. Either the government was covering up something, or there was a very interesting sociological experiment underway.
Yeah.
Like, what's accounting for this like huge mismatch? We didn't know, and it seemed like there was a pretty interesting answer there either way.
And is your starting point for this coming across the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office? I guess it's Arrow. Is that what they're? Is that what?
Right,
Is
that
that
was
what this
sort
group
of
is called?
where this all came to a head over the past few years.
So just tell us what that little crew was tasked with doing, the power they were given, and then what did you learn that they started to uncover as they searched this?
So going back to 2017 for a second, you had a group of people that came from the U.S. intelligence community that were making these types of claims, right? They said, we came from this community. We can't tell you exactly what we saw because it's like too secret, but there's really something there, and in the right setting, we think that the public should find out about that, and we can't testify about it openly because it involves these kind of classified secrets, but we would like to make our story heard in some way. And so out of that, those guys testified to Congress. Out of that process, Congress created a new Pentagon agency that would have the power to hear like classified secrets and even the most like closely held things, because the issue was these guys were like, well, you can go on Joe Rogan or whatever, but you can't like really reveal that what in that setting, or even testifying in Congress, because it's too highly classified. So they created an office, this agency Arrow that we were talking about, that was vested by Congress, that they could get to like the bottom of everything. There was like no limit to the type of double, triple classified, top secret, stuff that they were able to learn.
And that's all about, they could get to the bottom of whatever the government knew about UFOs.
They could get to the bottom of whatever the government knew about UFOs. They could get to the bottom of the claims that the U.S. government actually had been hiding, these cached UFO, these alien bodies. There was claims that the U.S. government had, elements of the U.S. government might have even murdered people in order to keep this secret. This organization they're able to go into like Area 51 out in Nevada and really like look through what's actually there. And so, part of what was exciting about the project was that like trying to find, what is it that these guys actually saw, right? And were they truthful about it with the public? Because, how often do you get to talk to somebody who actually went to Area 51 and hear all about it? So that's what they were tasked with doing. And they were given this kind of ultimate like flashlight to kind of go through the government's files and find out what the truth to these things were.
Aruna, it's incredible. It's sort of like there is this long running conspiracy theory that the government is sitting on, secrets that they've yielded from UFOs that have landed here. They're hiding things. As Joel said, there's alien bodies, there's alien crafts, and this group gets the golden key to go in and unearth the truth, whatever it is, about whatever we've been doing or not doing with aliens. I mean, is that a way to simplify this?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. They could take testimony from anyone that came forward that was a former intelligence community member, to talk about what they saw. They had sort of full access to anything, like to run down any of their claims. They could go to every agency within the intelligence community, access sort of, like you said, like all of the.
So just take us now to, what did they find out?
So they came out with a report, at this point more than a year ago, and their basic assessment was, we tried to run down all of these claims. What we determined is that they were it was like a lot of circular reporting, and you had people who heard from other people who heard from other people who caught a snippet of something, and then it sort of blew up in their minds and then blew up in the retelling. And that is essentially what the report said. And so that was sort of our starting point. Like, is this really an accurate assessment of what they found, or is there more to it? And so that was where we started.
And to me, I found that explanation to be very unsatisfying, right? Because anytime an institution grade is looking at a problem internally, and the answer is just that it's a few bad apples that are kind of gassing each other up, that's never a great answer. Because, like, at a very minimum, if we take them at their word that that the conspiracy theory is not true, the idea that there's no institutional factors to start with, and that they have no culpability as an organization, to me, like, never felt entirely credible. Now, it could be part of the story, and I think it was part of the story, but our goal was to try to dig into that deeper layer and find out what did the DoD as a whole been doing that created this mythology within the very, like, secretive and powerful parts of the national security community.
So what did you do next? Like, so you heard this story, and then what happened?
So, like, to start with, I really wanted to go deep into, like, the historical record of how these, like, stories came about, and do as much reading on declassified government records as I could. I went and I spoke to anybody who I could from the national security community who had these experiences, who had these claims. Something that struck me in talking to them, they were very cagey about, hey, this is too top secret for me to tell you. But, I'm pretty good at blowing past that. I've been doing this a long time. And when I started to get elements of their story, and more details, there was, like, a credible element to it. Like, they had seen something. They weren't making it up, right?
I feel like I'm on the edge of my seat here. It's like what did you find out? Like, what did they say?
A lot of what these guys had stumbled upon were secretive programs within the U.S. government. That the problem is, like, when you have an institution like the Pentagon, and there's things that they actually need to keep secret, like next generation, planes and drones and things like that. The issue is that there's going to be people who are going to be brushing up against that stuff who are not part of that program, right? But they, maybe they're a forklift operator, and they glance it, or they're in a place that they're not supposed to be at some point. All those programs, in order for them to remain secret, they have to have, like, a cover story. They have to have something that's made up about them in case somebody does see it. And if somebody does see it, they can't get, like, a real answer to their question. So that makes those people, like, even more suspicious. And, the more they get, like, pushed around with stories that are obviously not true, the more they start to suspect that it's something that's truly diabolical, that it's something that's truly crazy. And I think, you see conspiracy stories flourish in any area of American life where information is very limited, right? And I think that within the Pentagon, they've created, like, a very, like, fertile ground for that by having so many layers of secret programs and cover stories upon cover stories upon cover stories. And when you get a glimpse of something like that, and it's something that a colleague's working on, and they continue to give you, like, made up stories, and maybe you saw, like, for example, like, a craft that really, it's very hard for you to understand how it would be, how it would fly, how it would turn. It looks like something out of this world. And you only got a glimpse of it, and then the stories people are giving to you about it are obviously false. They're meant to be cover stories. Then you create a very fertile ground for people to start to make up things to fill that void. And I think, the next layer of this is that we found that in some instances, at least historically, the Pentagon did that intentionally. That when people started to ask questions, when people within the military or national security institutions started to ask questions about things that were, real aerospace programs, but ones that were not supposed to be revealed, it's a very hard problem for them to deal with, especially, like, when those people are internal. And some of the way that they did deal with that was by spreading rumors about UFOs, and about the provenance of this is from, crashed spaceships.
So in your article, you started off, and let me go to you, Aruna, for this, that, like, an Air Force colonel walks into a bar. Okay? Like, already?
Sounds like a joke.
Like, it sounds like a joke, and you got me. Finish that sentence. An Air Force colonel walks into a bar. Then what happens, Aruna?
Right. This was one of our sort of most surprising reveals. As we were doing the reporting, we uncovered the fact that one of the people that had gone to talk to Arrow was this former Air Force colonel who described how in the late 80s he had walked into a bar near Area 51 and essentially asked them to put up doctored photos and say that they were UFOs. Yeah, and say that they were UFOs. Yeah.
I am like having a holy shit moment. Keep going.
And that this was part of an actual sort of government plan to create a lot of confusion around Area 51 about what exactly was flying out there. And the understanding that we came to ultimately was that, they were trying to protect the cutting edge craft that they were testing out there. And a lot of this stuff would be flying, crash, look very weird, and there's lots of foreign spies in the area trying to figure out what is going on, and what the American government and American military is testing out there. And so the plan was to have this bar sort of play a role in protecting what they were doing and put up these photos and then lead to sort of confusion amongst people in the area about what exactly they might see, and like, oh, maybe that's the UFO that's there's a picture of at the bar, and like that might be what they first think of versus, oh, this is sort of the next generation of aircraft that the Air Force is testing out.
So, Aruna, you're saying that the U.S. government, our military, actually seeded the idea, with an S, that there are UFOs visiting us in order to hide Cold War technology that they were testing out, that they didn't want people sort of noticing and asking questions. And certainly we didn't want the Soviet Union to get a hold of that.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we came into this not quite with the idea that like that's what we would find. We thought maybe it was more just like misunderstandings that compounded, but here was a very deliberate effort to seed that myth.
And did you ever like figure out like how high on the chain of command this was?
Yeah, was this like
designed?
a rogue
like
guy in New Mexico, or was this
who did this?
Yeah,
it's actually like a question we're still working on right now because, if you imagine when you're going through like organizational kind of excuses and stories, right? Like the first layer is there's a few bad apples. Then, well, there was some institutional role, but the officers that were doing that, it was, they were sort of doing it of their own initiative on a localized level. And now, like as we're continuing to report it out, it looks like it looks like it went quite a bit higher than that. But we're trying to figure that out.
So did it work with the population, like going into the bar near like Area 51? Did they buy the lie, so to speak?
Like we're not I don't think we're saying that this is the only reason that people believe, that they saw UFOs out there. But this was definitely one piece of the fueling of the mythology that UFOs populate the skies out in Nevada and out west. And so I don't know that we can specifically say sort of what role exactly it had in fueling the entire mythology, but it was definitely a piece of it.
Tell us a little bit about what this covert weapons program is that they were trying to hide, and why did it need hiding?
It was like one of the crown jewels of the Cold War in terms of like U.S. aerospace programs. It was something called the F-117. It really was a stealth plane that was created by Lockheed Martin, which is where a lot of these UFO people believe that UFOs have been stored and reverse engineered. And it's a very interesting looking craft. If you look at it, if you saw it and you had never seen something like this, you really would think it's something from like outer space. It's this triangular shaped stealth airplane that's all black. You can really see that like in that time period, a lot of the UFO accounts went from being, like flying saucers to like these like triangle, like you'll start to read in the lore that a lot of it became these kind of triangular shaped crafts that seemed to move, in ways that no airplane could move.
Look, I'm an X-Files girl myself, Joel. You don't have to tell me about my triangular aircraft.
Yeah. And interestingly, like that plane wasn't really seen at all by the public until the Gulf War, where it played a big role. But it was revealed actually eventually because there was a series of crashes that fatal crashes during the testing phases that were hard enough for the Air Force to like explain away. And maybe after the first one, they said it was a different plane, and then after the second one, they had to kind of own up to what it was. And I think it kind of shows you a lot about how these kind of crash retrievals have become such a big part of the UFO lore in a way, because when a plane crashes, that's really the prime time that when a secret, a classified plane crashes or a test plane crashes like that, that's really like the moment when the Air Force has to either like tell the truth about a program that maybe they've been working on for 20 years and is really like important national security secret, or they have to like tell something that's like not quite the truth, right? Because you have to explain that somehow something happened, right? And I think that has a lot to do with like the sort of lore about these kind of crashed, these UFOs that always seem to be crashing in the earth, right? They've made it all the way here, but somehow
Yeah, somehow they crashed in our farm fields. Aruna, the other big mind-blowing revelation of your guys' work was a secret program in the military called Yankee Blue. Can you just tell us what you guys discovered about this?
Yeah, so this was sort of the other big reveal that we've uncovered of the Pentagon's own culpability in sort of seeding this myth. So you have the one place where they seem to be deliberately trying to fuel public misinformation to protect the craft. And then here, what we found is that internally, when they were training certain new commanders, they would be giving them the briefings about here's the special programs that you're going to have some involvement in, and that at the end of that briefing, they'd be like, "Hang on, there's one more thing we're going to read you onto," and they would slip them this piece of paper that had on it this picture of someone working on what looked like a spaceship, and then it had some language on it that described it as this sort of anti-gravity, maneuvering vehicle that, all of their work was really feeding onto. But we're not going to tell you about any more about this. This is all you're going to learn, and never speak about this again. And what we learned was that, this is also part of what fueled the mythology internally, because people think, fundamentally, I'm working on a program that's exploiting alien technology because of, this briefing.
That's crazy. So you're a new commander assigned to a classified operation, and you're getting like onboarded, and the military shows you a picture of a flying saucer and says, "There's a secret program, and I'm telling you about it now, but you can never tell anybody ever again about what you know. You're in on the secret. Go to work." That's nuts. That's nuts. And this wasn't ancient history, right? I mean, this was. Tell us about how when you guys did your reporting, what did the top brass of the military do or say
about this? Like,
yeah.
So there's some debate about like how recently it happened. It was definitely like into like the 2000s, and it looks like it was within the last 10 years. I think the way that it was explained to us is that, essentially these special access programs are sort of even above like, something that's just like a top secret or whatever. Special access programs mean it's only like a very small group of people who get to know about it. And these guys were kind of new commanders who hadn't been read on to special access programs before. And the thing about those read-ons when you're being told about it is it's a very exciting moment, because you get to learn about something that people really don't know exists at all. Something that's very like what they call in the military like an exquisite technology. And before they would give them this fake briefing, they would be briefed on something that was real. And imagine a type of technology related to space that nobody really knows exists. Something that would be very exciting. That would be like, wow, I didn't know that we could do that, right? And so you're already the way it was explained to us is that you're already in kind of like a very suggestible state, if you will, because you're being told about something that you're like, wow, I had no idea that we had this like crazy laser that can, take out satellites in space and or whatever it is. And that can, some kind of ultrasonic ray that can shoot from one satellite and then monitor what's being said from another satellite, something that really is like outside of what anybody knows that a capability we have. And so you're already like, wow, anything seems possible at this moment. And then they say, okay, and here's the second briefing. And this is kind of where the technology actually came from. And so you're in this like very suggestible state where anything seems possible. And now you're being told about this other thing. And, you know, we were told that even all these years later, when some of these guys were talking to Arrow, they were still in like a very heightened state of fear about revealing this because some of these command, when they were given this fake briefing on, on UFOs, they were told like, if you ever reveal this, you could be executed, right? And so, that stayed with them. They really believed that. The way it was described to us is, some of them they were like visibly shaken as they're describing this all these years later because they still didn't know if, something bad would happen to them for having done so.
You're sitting on this, 8 months of reporting. You have interviewed, you said how many people? More than 24 people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, can you explain to our listeners about how then does this story come out? Like, how was was there any pressure campaign to like not release your story? Like, how do two reporters like you have all of this information and then get this story out? Do you have to call the Pentagon and say, hey, we're about to run this story? Can you tell us about the process of how you get the story out and what, roadblocks did you hit?
I mean, one of the key things in this that was sort of satisfying at the end of this is that, after this long investigation, we think we've uncovered what looks like a Pentagon cover-up in a sense that like the report that this agency put out seemed to very much downplay the Pentagon's own institutional culpability, said nothing about, the Pentagon seeding some of this mythology, said nothing about this weird fake briefing. And so we thought, this is, like really surprising. And what are they going to say when we go to them with this? They're going to probably totally deny it. Then we'll have to figure out what we do with this. And, but once we laid it all out to them, they basically folded and acknowledged that, they had not included this in the earlier report and like all of this was true and, admitted that like, okay, this stuff did happen at the Pentagon. We will be, including it in a public report in the future. And so that sort of cleared a lot of hurdles for us because, you don't usually have a hard-hitting story where you have the agency that you're accusing of a cover-up admit to the cover-up.
This all is making me have just a renewed appreciation for journalism and reporting. And what I'd love to just have you guys discuss a little bit is that process where you sort of followed a gut instinct that said something doesn't smell right. But, and the reason I'm asking you this question is because I feel like we're in this moment where a lot of people smell things that don't smell right. But the leap then that's made to the next step is often a very big one, right? And so when you guys saw something that didn't smell right, you did something a little different. And I just wonder if there's something here for us as Americans in a society that's really roiling from so many conspiracies right now and thinking about so much stuff. Like, what do we do when something doesn't smell right? Like, what's the right thing to do?
I think about this a lot because I would say like most of the projects I've done over the last 8 or 9 years have been things that started out with an idea, kind of like exactly what you're saying, right? Where something didn't seem right, something felt like really off to me. And they were all ideas that I would say like some people at the start, kind of rightfully so, were like, well, maybe that, that's like kind of a conspiracy theory. And I think the idea of believing in a conspiracy is often the right instinct. I think the right way of looking at this is that there are a lot of reasons to mistrust these institutions. And I think the question is, what do you do with that like feeling? And I kind of have like a rule with this that something doesn't sit right, something doesn't feel right, and I have like an idea about it. I always think I'm entitled to like one layer of extrapolation, right? I'm able to say, well, okay, like the Pentagon, they're limiting the culpability to a few bad apples. That doesn't seem right. What could it be that they're that they're trying to hide. And I'll give myself one extrapolation, one hypothesis that I can then go and pursue. And in the beginning, it wasn't this. It wasn't that they were doing their own misinformation. I thought, they're probably hiding the fact that like they have like this, really siloed, secretive culture that kind of grooms a lot of people to become, a little bit crazy, right? And I'll give myself that one extrapolation, and then and that's that one hypothesis, and then I try to make it like as narrow as possible, so that it's like falsifiable, so that it's like something that you could be right or you could be wrong, and then I'll try to find ways to like test that. And then if I'm right, then I might give myself like another extrapolation, another hypothesis. I think where you get into the problems is that you have that one extrapolation. You're like, okay, the Pentagon has some role in this information, and then once you go to the second extrapolation without proving the first, then you can go further and further off course, right? Then you can be like, well, what would that they obviously have some role in it. So what is that role? Well, the role is that they have like a secret warehouse full of like, spaceships or whatever. And I think part of like the process, like when you're trying, I think that people's instincts are 100% right when they have this sort of mistrust for the national security state. And history has shown that the basic instinct of that is correct. But I think that the way that you try to parse that out, you have to be very like modest in the way that you do that. You have to like be willing to have a narrow enough hypothesis that's something that you can gather information about, and then you can build on that. And the idea is that you don't start out thinking that you know the answer. That's when you get into those problems.
Is it possible to do it without the infrastructure of a large news organization? Like if you're a regular citizen and you have some suspicions or skepticism of something, can you follow that? Because I think that's what we see and hear a lot from people, right? That we're in an era now of mistrusting the status quo, having questions about the status quo. But oftentimes I feel like people don't have the tools to really do something with that suspicion. Do you think you need a news operation, Aruna, to do something like this?
I mean, it took a lot of reporting, a lot of resources, and people trusting us and talking to us about what they saw and what they did. And that is not something that I think the general public has access to. And I mean, I think if people could see how much care and thought and deliberation we put into like not just doing the reporting, but doing the writing and putting the stories together and going through many rounds of edits with editors and even lawyers, like they could maybe have a little more trust in sort of the process that we go through and trust in our output at the end. I don't know that as journalists, and especially at sort of big legacy media organizations, that we do a great job of kind of explaining to people and like the broader public, like why they should trust us and like why this process is so rigorous. So I think maybe that's a broader conversation to have, but
Yeah.
but it's essentially the public has to trust the media to do that job for them, and that part has broken down. And so because they can't do it ourselves, we need to do it for them. But that's the part we need to work on.
I think that's also like there's an important point there too, which is like a lot of institutions within society, have become so secretive, right? And so bureaucratic and so large that it really is very like in a democratic society, like ideally, like members of the public can go and figure out like most of the stuff their government is doing. And I think the fact that you can't, I think is kind of the starting point for why people develop these like alternative theories. And the fact that it, requires like 7 months, even for us who've been doing this, a long time, right? Like to get like basic answers to something, I think that is a big part of the problem. I think the fact that you can't, as a regular citizen, just like find out more about what these secretive agencies are doing, like really engenders a lot of mistrust.
I was wondering what you guys thought about how people who don't trust, like the Wall Street Journal and other major media outlets, feel. I saw, in prepping for this episode, I did a deep dive on other articles that were referencing your article, and some of the critics were saying that this piece is just another one that's gaslighting the public into not believing UFOs again, and that it didn't clarify public understanding. How would you respond to them?
I mean, I would almost tack on to Maggie's
yeah.
question. Like, you guys made such a splash with this reporting, and it was fantastic. But as Maggie says, there's people pushing back on it, saying we're being gaslit. There's people literally in the article's comments here who say, isn't this whole article just a continuation of the disinformation? Someone else wrote, reads like another weak, opportunistically timed narrative control piece, almost COINTEL like in nature. So they're obviously referring to something we talked about earlier in the intro here about a secret FBI government program that was trying to infiltrate, Vietnam protesters and civil rights leaders. Like, there's people that feel like you guys, this article is part of the disinformation campaign, that they're still hiding the spaceships and that you're being fed a narrative and you're being used to spread a narrative as part of a even more profound disinformation campaign. Sometimes with a conspiracy theory, you can come up with some answers, do the investigative reporting, put evidence on the table, put people on the record, and it's still not enough. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Right. I think we do an incredible job as a paper of doing the actual investigations that we do and the reporting that we do. But we don't do a good job of sort of selling to the public, like why they should trust us. And it's hard for us to do that because, a lot of the reporting we do is pretty sensitive. Not every source is willing to go on the record. And we try to do the best job we can, not coming into it with any preconceptions and just follow sort of what the reporting shows us and kind of go from there. And that's what we tried to do with every story. And that's what we, especially did with this one. And right, it's inevitable that given that we're reporting on sort of what a lot of people view as a conspiracy theory, like we ourselves are going to get roped up into that conspiracy theory. And we did the best we could with trying to answer the questions we had and lay out what people told us and not just take what anyone tells us for granted, but like really try to run it down and, verify it from several different directions. And, like Joel started out this conversation, like we, were very open to the idea that like maybe we were going to find like a secret alien program. And we tried to run down every allegation that people had, sort of similar to what Arrow tried to do, and sort of ended up where we ended up. Like we could not find any evidence that this program was real. And
I think like on a deeper level though, right? Like also that type of feedback, I think that they're right to question it, right? Like I think that they should question it. I think that they should question and consider the idea that that perhaps these journalists got used, or perhaps this is like part of the bigger cover up. Like this story is not attempting, these stories were not attempting to be like the ultimate answers to like the mysteries in the sky, right? Like we went out, we did an investigation. Here's kind of like what we took back with us. And there's plenty of room to question that stuff, and there's plenty of room to think that we got it wrong. And I think that it's good for people to question, good for people to wonder whether whether we got it right and to come up with alternatives. I would say that, in general, those same demands that they, put upon the Wall Street Journal, I think they should put upon, people who are making these claims too. And I think, you have a group of people who for, the last number of years have made these extraordinary claims. And, I think it's really healthy for them to say, well, the Wall Street Journal, maybe these guys got it wrong. And I think that they should question us. And I think that they should question the people who are making these claims as well. And I think that's kind of how the public comes to a better answer, not by like relying on just one institution or other.
We hear that a lot in public health. There's a lot of theories or suspicions that float, and there's a whole media ecosystem of podcasters and influencers who are grabbing things and disseminating them. And we hear a lot from the public health side that say like, we've got to prove every word we're saying. There's a lot of people behind microphones that are able to sort of say whatever they want with no accountability. And both are sort of treated as like, what you going to pick? So I take that point about if you're going to hold the Wall Street Journal to a high standard, you got to hold the folks that you're listening to that are raising the questions and floating theories
Yeah.
to a high standard too.
I think something that's really interesting in the wake of our reporting, because we did get quite a bit of pushback, but what I found in the longer run of it is that I've started seeing that happening. You can go on these Reddit threads and you'll see people being like, wow, we all know the Wall Street Journal story is bullshit state propaganda. But on the other hand, if that's the case, then maybe these guys who've been making these claims and saying that they know about this cache of secret spaceships, like maybe it's time for them to say where that cache is, right? Like, and you are starting to have like a little bit of a shift in that community where they're sort of demanding answers from the people who've been making those claims. And I think that's as it should be.
It's not like this reporting is like, therefore, the last word on any ability for the government to hide something that could be in the future something else. And I think that's also kind of important to note, which is you did reporting that took you down a certain path that led you towards certain evidence that showed that these particular programs, they were kind of using people to cover up these particular weapons programs. I think that, because I mean, again, I count myself as part of the 65% of Americans who think there is like we are not alone in this universe. I said it. I don't think it's little green men. I believe our future aliens are like
what color are they, Brenda?
I think they're like blobs. I don't think they have limbs, and I think they're really good dancers. Like that's my like image of the future of
friendly
of like right, like blobs who can like really dance. But I guess what there's this idea of certainty that people grapple with a lot, that like people say something and that ends up being like the word. Like maybe they're feeling a little bit threatened by the fact that like your reporting seems to then close the door on the possibility of anything else. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, we're definitely not closing the door to any possibility for sure. I think what we were trying to do with these stories is just say, like, we tried to run down these allegations that are out there and look into what this Pentagon office found and try to get a deeper understanding of what they found. And that's what we presented, in these stories. But it's definitely not foreclosing the possibility that there is something more.
How much is left like on the table? I think as investigative reporters, you really have to double check something and you have to triple source it, and there's a lot that didn't make it into your story, I imagine. Like, how much is left?
Yeah, like quite a bit.
What are you covering up? What are you holding on to?
There's a lot more threads we could pull, and more roads to go down. But
little green threads.
Or
this is
great
what we
blobs.
can for now. So.
All right.
Listen, I will also say you can stand and look at the starry night sky. And if you've ever seen the Starlink satellites come by, like it feels like you're in a frickin' science fiction movie. That happened.
I haven't seen
once.
them.
It's
This
nuts.
is actually what one of Arrow's findings was, that a lot of sort of unidentified, I guess UFOs or UAP that they call it now, unidentified aerial phenomenon. They ended up attributing a fair amount of it to glint from Starlink satellites, and so
it all comes back to Elon at the end of the day. Listen, I just want to thank Joel Schectman and Aruna Viswanatha, who had this amazing reporting from the Wall Street Journal. Again, a little bit different than what we normally do, but actually I think they kind of made it all quite relevant to what we talk about on the show. So I just want to thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really awesome. So a huge thank you to Joel Schectman, Aruna Viswanatha from the Wall Street Journal. And that is our episode. Please do check out Substack. We'll have a post out about it. Do consider becoming a paid subscriber. You'd be supporting the pod. You'd be supporting all this good work if you do like us. And I am Brenda Adhikari. She is Maggie Bartlett. He is Tom Johnson. He is Dr. Mark. We will see you right back here next week.